Good morning. Mr. Coleman, would you please give me your full name and DOC number?
Good morning. Bryan Coleman, 627-369.
Do we have a list of, yes, just Mr. Lubin? Mr. Coleman, you're set this morning for a revocation hearing. I want to explain our procedure to you. First, I'm going to cover your parole revocation questionnaire. Then I'm going to read the allegations of how it's alleged you violated your parole. I'll then ask you to plead either guilty, not guilty, guilty with a statement, or not guilty with a statement. And then we'll have a full discussion about your allegations. You have several people who are here on your behalf. Your attorney, Mr. Jack Lubin, client advocate, Roxanne Barnes, your girlfriend, Linnell Robinson, and your mother, Bryan Coleman. Do you understand our procedure?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Lubin, would you make an appearance for the record, please?
Good morning, board. Jack Lubin, attorney here on behalf of Mr. Coleman.
All right. Mr. Coleman, have you had an opportunity? Do you have your parole revocation questionnaire in front of you?
Yes, sir.
Is that information, is that your signature on the bottom of the page, June 2nd, 2023?
Yes, sir.
And at the time you filled that out, were all those answers accurate and correct?
Yes, sir.
Are they accurate and correct still today?
Yes, sir.
And you're represented by Mr. Lubin here today?
That'll be correct.
And you're prepared to go forward?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'm going to read the allegations against you, and if you wish to confer with Mr. Lubin, you certainly can, but I'm going to ask you to enter a plea to each one of them. The first one is number 3. You moved from your reported address without permission and failed to provide a new address to your parole officer. How do you plead to that allegation?
Can I refer to Mr. Lubin?
Certainly.
Yeah, and Mr. Coleman, as a reminder, the board noted that you can either plead guilty or not guilty with explanation to each. Would you like me to enter a plea, or do you want to enter a plea for yourself?
You can enter a plea because we had already went over this before.
Yes. And so at the preliminary hearing and in Mr. Coleman and I's discussions, we're going to plead guilty with explanation to that one.
Okay.
I'd be happy to offer a global explanation to all of the alleged violations that fall within the technical realm, or I can handle them one by one, whatever the board.
Okay, we'll get to that in just a moment. First, let's go ahead and go through the arraignment, so to speak. Number 4, you failed to refrain from criminal activity, which is shown by your arrest on April the 20th of 2023 by the New Orleans Police Department for the charge of domestic abuse battery. How do you plead to that allegation?
And to that one, we are going to plead not guilty with explanation.
Okay, and all of the charges were refused on May the 17th of 2023. Number 6, you failed to provide proof of employment while on parole supervision. What's the plea to that one?
Guilty with explanation.
Okay, and you moved, number 9 is you moved from your reported residential address and failed to provide an address where you could be visited.
Guilty with explanation.
And that finally, number 10, you failed to make any payments towards your parole supervision and currently are $1,260 in arrears.
Guilty with explanation.
Mr. Coleman, your case has been assigned to Mr. Pete Freeman. He will begin our interview process. So would you please answer any questions he may have?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Freeman?
Okay, Mr. Coleman, my background is probation and parole. I used to be the director. So I'm gonna get to the meat and potatoes of this situation. I'm not as concerned about where you were living as long as you can give us a permanent address now. Were you working? I mean, did you have the means to pay some fees?
Yes, sir. I was working, but I had just got a job, and my job, the first job that I had, wasn't paying enough. So I had just reconnected to another job site, And I just was getting a good amount of pay that was going to help me provide for my family and pay the fines and fees that I needed to pay correctly in an appropriate amount of time that I had.
Okay, do you still think this job will be open if you get out?
Yes, sir. When I got incarcerated, I called my boss and let him know that I was incarcerated. And he just took me off the schedule. That way I don't get fired. So he told me when I get out, he recommended me to reapply if he's gonna rehire.
Okay, and what was this job? What were you doing?
I was a laborer at Zachary. It's like a
I know that.
Yeah.
Okay. Now let's talk about something. And I want you to tell me the absolute truth because it's gonna go a long ways today. I've read the arrest reports, I've read the statement. Did you and Miss Dominique have a dispute on that date?
Yeah, it was a verbal dispute.
Okay. Did you push her back in the doorway?
No, sir.
Okay, now be honest with me, okay? Things will go a lot better on you.
Yeah, I'm 100% honest, sir.
Okay. Did your brother and a friend of hers have to try to pull you off of her?
No, my brother and her friend was there. They didn't have to pull me off her because, like I said, I wasn't on her. It was just argument, and she was just over it, loud. And when it came to that point, I just left the house. That's where everything messed up. That because when she was screaming and fussing, and my brother and her friend, they was trying to stop her from screaming and fussing, I just left, and she called the police on me. I didn't know what was going on because I removed myself from the situation by leaving the area completely.
Did she bite you?
No, she didn't bite me.
Are you still dating her?
No, sir. We wasn't dating. We was just neighbors at the time. That was friends. Like we wasn't dating, officially dating. We was just neighbors at the time.
Are y'all still friends and
No,
be neighbors?
no, we're not neighbors at this time. Like when all that happened, it took place that Section 8 got involved and my mom had to move. So
Yeah. All right. Mr. Coleman, I'm gonna have some recommendations, and I have no further questions.
Okay, let's hear from your mother. Miss Bryan Coleman.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Let me raise the volume up. Good morning.
We can hear you.
Okay.
Tell us what you'd like us to know, ma'am, about your son.
Oh, I didn't hear that. Good morning. My name is Bryan Coleman, and I'm the mother of Bryan Coleman. And I come to you all with great enthusiasm, and great happiness in speaking on behalf of my son. I sent mitigation letters to his lawyer. She asked us to send mitigation letters. So if you would like to, I don't know, I don't know if she have them, but the things that I would like to speak on behalf of my son, Bryan is a very well-mannered child. Bryan graduated from Joseph S. Clark in 2013. Bryan graduated from high school. When I had Bryan, I knew Bryan was gonna make me proud because Bryan was always there by my side. Bryan is a kind child, very, very well-mannered, very matured. And when Bryan re-entered society and he attended Delgado Community College, where he had hopes of obtaining a degree from there in engineering, because he was always there to help others to fix on anything, fix the lawnmower on anything. Bryan worked 2 jobs and was doing everything positive in society. He is a caring person. Bryan, when he came home, Bryan also feel a void. I had a son that had passed away a couple of years ago, and Bryan feel that void. Bryan is well known in his family for helping us all. When he re-entered society again, he had demonstrated to me that he was determined to overcome the mistakes that he had made in life by being productively, and he was. And I asked the court for leniency on my son this morning. He's a very positive child. He was doing everything positive.
Yeah.
He was doing everything positive, going to school, trying to get a degree in engineering, working two jobs.
Thank you, Ms. Coleman. We've got a lot of people that we want to talk, but we understand what your comments are, and we appreciate your comments.
Okay, thank you. And I ask for mercy on my son because he's a very good child. He didn't do anything.
Yes, ma'am. We appreciate that.
Okay,
We'll
thank
now
you.
hear from Ms. Linnell Robinson, Mr. Coleman's girlfriend. Ms. Robinson, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear. Okay. Okay, so I'll be reading off of the letter. I have known Bryan for 4 years now, and we have been partners for 3 of those years. During our second year, we decided to move in together. Bryan has always helped with the bills and helped around the house. He cleaned every day, washed dishes, because he knew I didn't like to do that. Bryan and I started college together. He enrolled in college with me. He was going for his degree for automotive technology. We told each other we would graduate together, and he has always been a provider to me, especially when I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. He stepped up in a major way. Bryan came to every single doctor's appointment, and he made sure to remember everything every doctor and nurse told me. That way he can let my mom know and keep her in the loop. Bryan prayed for me and with me every night, and was emotionally there for me when I needed him. So he gave me encouraging words and made sure he lifted me up during my tough times. I was no longer able to work due to being disabled. So Bryan was always sweet and gentle. I have never known Bryan to be a violent person, especially not with me. He loved and cared for me during such a challenging time and made the transition super easy while taking on other tasks. Bryan began working at Take 5 full time, and he even worked overtime doing delivering for Uber, all while attending school and still taking care of me. Bryan is extremely hardworking and makes sure he never misses a day. With Bryan being currently away, it is hard for me to pick up the pieces because he was such a great provider. We continue to pray that he can make it back home. He also got a career advancement and started working at the company called Zachary at a plant. Bryan was able to save up money, and he also bought himself a really nice car, and that was one of his biggest accomplishments. I honestly think with everything going on at the end of 2021 and 2022, it was hard for Bryan to focus on himself or anything really, but besides providing for his family. Ultimately, Bryan is responsible, but with me now aware of his obligations to his parole, I can now help him, keep him on track with all of his responsibilities, as such, keeping his parole officer updated and also paying his fees.
Thank you, ma'am. We appreciate your comments. Ms. Barnes?
I'm going to go straight. My name is Roxanne Barnes. I'm a client advocate with the public defenders. I want to list for the board the organizations and resources that I've mustered on Mr. Coleman's behalf. Should he have any difficulty obtaining a job from the employer that he seems confident he can go back to, I want to note that I will connect him with one. I have several resources, including CEO Works, which is a temp service that employs recently incarcerated individuals. I will also try and connect him with the First 72 for peer advocacy and for job support, so he will not have difficulty obtaining a job and paying back the arrears on his parole. I also want to flag that he is interested in learning some techniques for de-escalation in light of this experience and incarceration. So I have made him an appointment with CADA, Prevention and Recovery Services, to learn those techniques. He's scheduled for that on the 24th of this month at 11 a.m. That is attached in the packet that the board received yesterday. Once Mr. Coleman secures this gainful employment, I will do my best to ensure that he communicates this with the parole officer. Steady income will ensure that he's able to financially pay back those arrears. Once he works through this degree at Delgado, that will hopefully put him in the path of lucrative job opportunities, and he will continue to make those payments on time. I also want to note that he has a myriad of community supports whose letters are included in this packet. He will return to living with Miss Linnell Robinson, who he does help to provide for financially, like she noted. She has, like she said, been made aware of his responsibilities and will help him to stay in compliance. The same is true of the other people in the packet. I have personally spoken to all of them and ensured they understand he needs to register his address, his place of employment, and he needs to be making those payments, and he needs to avoid any entanglements with the law. All of them will be able to help him do this now that everyone is on the same page about what his responsibilities and obligations to parole are going to be. As well, I will remain his advocate for the duration of this period of time and for as long as he needs to ensure that everything is in compliance and that he is able to leave jail, re-enter society, continue his degree at Delgado, get back to automotive repair, which is his passion, and continue with a working relationship with parole. I'll be available to him and to the board for questions.
Thank you very much, ma'am. We appreciate your comments. Mr. Coleman, before we turn it over to Mr. Lubin, is there anything you'd like to say to the board?
No, sir.
Mr. Lubin?
Thank you, everyone, for speaking on Mr. Coleman's behalf. I appreciate you being here, and thank you, board, for asking thoughtful questions and listening. I'm going to first offer an explanation to each plea entered, and then address more broadly the supports we have in place for Mr. Coleman, and advocate on behalf of Mr. Coleman for why he should be released back into the community. I want to start with the elephant in the room in terms of allegations, the only allegation to which we pled not guilty, which is the allegation that Mr. Coleman failed to refrain from criminal conduct as evidenced by his arrest. As the board noted, the charges in the case, the charges on which Mr. Coleman was arrested, were ultimately refused, which I think is quite indicative of the lack of substantiation of the allegations. But I think the exact way that they were refused bears noting. It's my understanding, and I've been provided with documentation to show this, that within a week, I believe even less, of a police report being filed, the person who had filed a police report and who had called the police in the first place went to the district attorney's office and signed an affidavit requesting that the charges be dropped. Now, because Mr. Coleman had not been arrested on these charges, because it was an active warrant rather than an open criminal charge, the charge drop form was never processed. A warrant stayed open for the better part of a year and a half. Mr. Coleman was fully unaware that a warrant was out. Had he known, he would have turned himself in. Everyone in Mr. Coleman's life thought this was over. Now, of course, it did not go through because the mechanics of refusing or dropping a case are very opaque and very difficult for even a lawyer like me to follow. But ultimately, I do want the board to note that this was a situation that was almost immediately resolved on behalf of the parties and from the parties. This was not a situation where the DA's office had to spend the entire 30 to 60-day period investigating, ultimately determining that the case was not fruitful. It was clear from the start that the story we see on the police report is not the story that should rule the day. Now, Mr. Coleman and I have discussed extensively, and Mr. Coleman admitted to the board that there was a verbal dispute that day, and Mr. Coleman knows, as someone who was on parole, as evidenced by the fact that he's interested in de-escalation and anger management programs, that it is important to not put yourself in a position where law enforcement could be involved. He is clear about that responsibility, and he knows that he should not have been in that room. But I want the board to be very clear that that does not equate to failing to refrain from criminal conduct. And because I have not been furnished with any discovery, any body cam, or anything because of the fact that the case was refused, there's only so much I can point the board to today to positively disprove that any criminal conduct occurred. But I would ask the board to consider that these are only allegations that were recanted within a week's time, allegations that are now on the better part of 2 years old, and also allegations that do not match any of Mr. Coleman's prior record, which is a record consisting almost exclusively of charges related to substance use, a problem that Mr. Coleman has well addressed by now, but also because of the fact that this charge was refused conclusively. Now, as to the other allegations, the ones to which Mr. Coleman pled guilty, I would note, and I also believe the board noted this, that these are largely violations that fall within the technical realm. One of them, I believe, is duplicative because there are two allegations that more or less allege that Mr. Coleman failed to update his address. And then there is one allegation that he failed to pay his probation fee or parole fees and provide proof of employment. I would note for the board, first and foremost, that I have discussed with Mr. Coleman, Ms. Barnes has discussed with Mr. Coleman, and we as a support network for Mr. Coleman have all gotten on the same page about what precisely his obligations to parole are. The fact that parole is a privilege, the fact that it's something that comes with responsibilities. Mr. Coleman is aware of this now. I would add for context that Mr. Coleman was released from incarceration and entered his period of parole during more or less the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, when much of our daily lives, including things like interacting with probation and parole, had been transferred to the virtual realm. I do believe that there was a breakdown in communication from Mr. Coleman to the board because of the fact that the release process that he experienced when he left was a unique and new one. Now, that's not an excuse, and that does not mean that Mr. Coleman did not have an obligation to follow up on these duties. But I would ask the board to consider that all of these allegations, in the grand scheme of things, are allegations that can easily be fixed. As we've noted, Mr. Coleman has permanent and stable housing. It's a home he lives in with his girlfriend, who has taken the time out of her day to come in front of the board today, and who has made herself accountable to the board, as Mr. Coleman also intends to do. We have community members around him who will ensure that he does not go back into jail, because as you've heard from his community, people depend on Mr. Coleman. He is a caretaker. He stepped into the void when his brother passed away. He stepped up when his partner was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. The other letters, including in the packet, detail how he diligently communicated with a friend during his friend's 12-year period of incarceration. Mr. Coleman is there for people. He is someone on whom people rely and on whom people lean. And Mr. Coleman has the privilege of entering a community where he can do more of that service, but also one where the community can hold him accountable and make sure that in his drive to take care of his community, he doesn't forget to take care of things like paying his parole fees. I would note that, and you've heard this today and can see it in the support packet, but Mr. Coleman does have either stable employment or the support of my office through Ms. Barnes to ensure that he gets employment. He has housing secured. He is still enrolled in Delgado and is well on his way to getting a degree that, as Ms. Barnes noted, will increase his earnings potential, and a degree that's in line with his interests. And also, he has the community that is going to ensure that he is up to date with parole. Ultimately, I would ask the board to note that with the one exception of these allegations that were promptly refused and promptly recanted by the complaining witness, the only other allegations here stem from a breakdown in communication with a parole officer. Mr. Coleman is someone who has done an admirable job of getting back on his feet after a period of incarceration, who is doing things the right way, who is earning his own income, who is taking care of his family and his loved ones, and who is setting down roots to lead a positive life, be the man he wants to be, and actualize his potential. I would ask the board to consider all of this because these supports are still in place and the path for Mr. Coleman is still clear, available, and waiting for him. All he needs is the board's mercy, and all he needs is the opportunity to return to his family, return to his partner, and return to his community. So I'd ask the board consider all of that and offer Mr. Coleman the opportunity to get another chance.
Thank you, Mr. Living. Board ready to vote?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Freeman?
Okay, Mr. Coleman, I wish you to been a little bit more honest with me. Your attorney doesn't have access to these records, but there was body camera footage, there was statements that you were pulled off of her. But the fact remains that you were headed in the right direction, trying to do the right thing. So my vote today is gonna be to do not revoke, and that you report to Ms. Barnes. I think it's at the DA's office, Ms. Barnes. I think
I'm with the public defender's office.
I'm
Um,
sorry, we're at the public defender's office and take some de-escalation classes. Also, I want you to stay away from Miss Dominic. And for the next 6 months, I want you to wear an electronic monitoring device that will be provided by probation and parole at no cost to yourself, so that we can assure that you do not go around the victim. And that's my recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Raymond. Ms. Wise?
Mr. Coleman, I too have some concerns, but I'm going to take a chance on you. And my vote is the same for the same reasons.
Mr. Coleman, you have 2 votes, not to revoke you, to release you, put you back on parole with the same, with additional conditions. I agree with my colleagues. My vote would be the same. So the decision is, and you need to understand, you need to report to Ms. Barnes and follow all of the recommendations of the public defender office. You'd have no contact with the victim in this case, and you are to be under electronic monitoring for the entire time
No, 6.
for 6 months. Good luck to you, sir.
All right, thanks.